There is no doubt but what the cost and price of drugs is an important public policy issue. It has significant consequences to Kansas families, has significant consequences to taxpayers as we look at Medicare costs. And I think our focus, I hope our focus in this hearing will continue to be how do we make sure that FDA is doing its job well to create competition and opportunities for families to make other choices and to hold down the cost of those prices of those drugs as a result. Let me ask a couple of questions. First of all, EpiPen in particular is a combo. It's a combination between a device and a drug. Are there unique circumstances that make the generic to be more difficult in that circumstance because of the combination?
Yes, the firm that markets EpiPen has patents on the device component that go through 2025. So any firm wishing to make a generic would have to be able to get around those patents somehow, not infringe upon those patents or challenge them successfully to market a copy.
I think your column that you've written, I've read, it talks about generics for the drug, but they're not widely used.
Okay, this is confusing too, all right? There is another brand of epinephrine auto-injector, all right, that FDA has approved. We've approved a number of them, all right, but they're in the first category I talked about. They're all standalone new drug applications, all right? So they aren't generic copies. They're each one separate. Each of them does the same thing, it treats anaphylaxis, though. And one of those, there's something that people call an authorized generic. It's very confusing because it is not a generic, all right? It is when a brand name company decides to market their product, usually along with marketing their brand product, they take the brand name off and they make it look like a generic. And then they market that, usually at a lower price. And so they have some people who have the brand loyalty who stay with the brand, but then they can also compete in the generic market with this version. It's the same product. They make it in the same plants, usually, and everything, just has a different label on it, okay? And so the other manufacturer of the current EpiPen, current epinephrine auto-injector, which is not called EpiPen, it's Adrenaclick, okay? That one has an authorized generic, and that's what's currently being marketed.
Thank you, I think, for that clarification.
Sorry.
You indicated that, first of all, let me ask this question. I indicated in my opening statement about a backlog. You did a pretty persuasive set of statements that indicate that there really isn't a backlog. And so if we were asking you, what are you going to do to solve the backlog problem, you would tell us that the FDA is on path in the way that it should be. Is that fair?
At the very back of the slide, the papers I passed out, there's this chart. And what it shows is right now, there's 2,300 ANDAs, which is the generic drug applications, in the process of FDA reviewing them. The GDUFA ones are here at the top, okay? They were the backlog. Now they've come back in. We're reviewing them again, not all of them. And then each year, the goals become shorter for us to do the first review. And as I said, next year, 2017, is going to be 10 months. So to be honest and completely straightforward about this, these are more applications than we'd like to have in process. It would be better if we had fewer applications in process. I have given authorization to our manufacturing reviewers to hire 50 more people, temporary people, who are going to work on trying to get this down. But mainly, this is going to be up to the manufacturers to submit to us approvable applications. And then we will be able, in a cycle, to approve them. If they still have deficiencies, then they have to go back, and it takes longer.
The way, Doctor, that I understood your testimony is that what I described as a backlog really is applications that are pending, that have been reviewed to some extent, but not yet approved. sent back to the drug manufacturer for further actions on their part.
That's correct.
Okay.
There's about 1,700 with the manufacturers.
And are those problems with the application, are they process, in the proverbial sense, they didn't cross the T and dot the I, or these are substantive issues, didn't provide the necessary justification for an FDA decision?
We have tried to make these all substantive. Part of the changes we made for GDUFA was that we're calling the people all the time while we're reviewing their application. We call that information requests, so that these minor issues do not delay a decision on application. And so we're back and forth. We send out thousands of these information requests and try to get the application fixed up as much as possible. But then when we send it out as a complete response, then the manufacturer has substantive work to do.
I have a series of other questions, but let me turn now to Senator Merkley. Follow-ups. I indicated in my opening statement that at least the understanding is that the FDA is close to finalizing negotiations with the industry on a new round of fees and regulatory requirements. You indicated in your response to my question that they're really, again, it goes back to the definition of a backlog. This is a process by which it takes a number of steps.
That's right.
Are you able to tell me, is that part of the negotiations with the industry? From their perspective, I don't know whether they would, I don't know one way or another whether they'd say the same thing that you indicated. Were there issues that could be negotiated with the companies in this process that reduce the number of times it's necessary to have the application reconsidered?
Well, I think that's definitely on their mind and on our minds too. Mr. Merkley's questions, Senator Merkley's questions. You know, one of the things that we need to do is get a process for generics where we give advice to complicated generics before they come in and send an application. That's what we negotiate under the Prescription Drug User Fee Act for the new drugs. And that's something that there's great interest in having a program so that for these complicated things, it isn't just a pill. We can interact with companies and give them advice and tell them what to do. So both this workload, let's not call it a backload, but our large workload we have now, part of which is inherited from the things that are cycling multiple times, is on everyone's mind, and it's definitely part of our discussions as how to deal with that.
Can you report anything about the status of those negotiations, or is that beyond your?
Well, I could say with the industry, they've concluded, and obviously there are many other steps. We would have to have a public meeting as described in the statute, and then, of course, we will hope to provide the consequences to Congress.
Is there a time frame in which you would expect that consequences to Congress to occur?
Yeah, I think that was written in the statute. If you excuse me, I'll ask my colleague here, yeah?
Yes. We post notice soon, and we try to, HHS tries to transmit the package to Congress
By January?
by January.
Okay, thank you. Sorry for the, I wanted to give you accurate information. We hope to post those notices soon, and then we would transmit to Congress by January.
And that's your expectation?
That, I would certainly hope so. Yes, that's what the...
I also mentioned that you were able, I know this is not a generic drug, but we were talking about Duchenne and the muscular dystrophy drug. It's not a generic, but at least the reports are that you found a way to accelerate the process. Is that an accurate analysis or a statement or description of what occurred?
This description of what occurred is that the product was approved under something called accelerated approval. That may be a little bit of a misnomer, but that's what it's called. What it means is you don't have clinical trials that showed the product gave benefit to patients. You approve on a surrogate endpoint that we feel is reasonably likely to predict clinical benefit. That's how we approve a lot of HIV drugs over the years, and cancer drugs and many other drugs have been approved under accelerated approval. Then the company has to prove with later studies that the product really does have the predicted benefit.
So, is there anything to learn from that process that would apply to generics?
I don't think so, because that has to do with showing effectiveness. And generics get their effectiveness by showing they're the same as the reference drug.
So a different standard.
Yes.
And the generic ought to be more easily met?
Yes, the generic doesn't have to do clinical studies. In fact, they're not allowed to do clinical studies of efficacy, or else they can't be a generic.
Doctor, do you have anything you'd like to tell us that we've not gotten from you from our questioning?
Well, I do think that we are very focused on making sure that any drugs that can be approved and are safe and effective can get on the market, that the pathways are clear, that there aren't unnecessary barriers to getting on the market. However, I would say that our standards have to do with making sure those drugs work for patients and that they're reasonably safe and that they are of adequate quality, so that the drug supply in the United States is a very reliable, high-quality drug supply. And we do try to expedite where we can to improve availability. We're sensitive to that.
Dr. Woodcock, thank you very much for your testimony today. In my view, this hearing was what a congressional hearing in most instances should be, an opportunity to be educated and to learn. And you've certainly helped me in that process. For members of the subcommittee, any questions that you would like to submit for the hearing record should be turned into the subcommittee staff within 1 week, which is Wednesday, September the 28th. And we would appreciate it, Doctor, if FDA could respond within 4 weeks thereafter. And again, I thank everyone for their attendance today, and I will conclude this hearing. The meeting is adjourned.